billions of people wake up surrounded by convenience neighbors nearby, grocers a drive away, the internet at their fingertips. But then there are the rare few who've chosen to exist in places most of us would find unbearable. We're talking about structures clinging to vertical rock faces, towers rising from crashing ocean waves, and dwellings that seem to float between earth and sky. The real question isn't why would anyone live here, but rather, how do humans even survive here? What drives someone to abandon proximity for extreme isolation at impossible altitudes or on treacherous cliffs? Throughout history, monks, adventurers, and ordinary people have claimed these places as home, building some of Earth's most astounding structures. Welcome to a tour of our planet's most audacious dwellings, where engineering meets desperation, and every day means battling the elements. These aren't fairy tales or digital renderings. They're real, still inhabited, and they'll make you question what you're truly capable of enduring. The isolated beacon that defied a storm. When you think of lighthouses, you probably imagine a relatively safe structure anchored to a piece of land. But Legimo, situated off the coast, represents something far more sinister. This isn't just a navigation beacon, it's a defiant monument to human stubbornness in the face of nature's most violent tantrums. The lighthouse achieved worldwide infamy on the 21st of December, 1989. A photographer happened to fly past the structure at the exact moment when a storm of catastrophic proportions was battering the tower. The harbor keeper, Theodore Malorn, had just stepped outside when the sea decided to strike back with all its fury. A wave that towered nearly as high as a 10-story building suddenly materialized from behind, swallowing the entire tower whole. The distance between life and death measured mere fractions of a second. The psychological toll of working in such isolation shouldn't be underestimated. Those who've served as keepers learn to occupy their minds constantly, inventing tasks and projects just to avoid staring too long at the water below. Because once your thoughts drift toward the reality of where you are, a place designed to save lives can rapidly become a prison that extracts a different kind of toll, a mental one. Iceland's forbidden sanctuary. Lady Island, Iceland hosts a small white dwelling that seems painted onto the landscape itself, nestled between dramatic black stone cliffs and the relentless Atlantic waters. The structure wasn't designed as anyone's dream home. It originated in 1953 as a basic shelter where hunters pursued puffins across the remote terrain. The island functions as a natural fortress, utterly separated from civilization. No boat landings exist here, no constructed pathways, and barely any evidence that humans have ever successfully inhabited it. The residents face a practical problem that transcends everyday concerns. Their fresh water comes entirely from rain captured through roof systems. A prolonged drought doesn't just create discomfort, it creates a survival crisis. Despite its haunting beauty and the romantic notion of island living, this location remains firmly locked away under legal protection maintained by local hunting authorities. The house stands as a geographic paradox, magnificent and unreachable, visible yet forbidden, a symbol of human aspiration, permanently closed to human habitation. The mountain sanctuary carved from stone, Bivvaco Buffer holds a unique and rather melancholic distinction. Many geographical specialists refer to it as the loneliest human shelter on the entire planet. The structure seems to evaporate into the vertical rock face, presenting only a small opening to the world while embedding itself into a natural stone cavity. Towering walls of vertical stone surround it, with no conventional hiking path leading upward. The shelter spent decades in abandonment, its roof collapsing repeatedly under the weight of avalanches and the relentless punishment of alpine weather patterns. Eventually, in 2022, Italy's 6th Alpini Regiment undertook a complete restoration project, transforming the structure into an emergency refuge for mountaineers confronting unexpected hardships. The interior space seems almost deliberately cramped. Raw stone forms the walls, and the only furnishings are 12 basic wooden bunks. Visitors shouldn't expect electrical outlets, running water, or modern toilet facilities. The ascent demands serious mountaineering expertise. Climbers must navigate iron ladders bolted directly into vertical stone, traverse narrow exposed ledges with nothing but air beneath them, and cross the famous Cristalla suspension bridge. A 2.7-meter span suspended above a massive void. This same bridge became famous when the action film Cliffhanger featured it prominently, cementing its reputation as one of the world's most dramatic gateways. Where the air grows dangerously thin, Capanna Margherita maintains its record as Europe's highest building, positioned atop Ponte Giuffetti within the Alps' most brutal environment. Sections of the structure actually project outward over a cliff edge, creating the unsettling illusion that the building itself floats between clouds and stone. Reaching this location requires traversing massive glacial fields and navigating hidden crevasses masked by snow. The supply chain depends entirely on helicopter deliveries. No truck or cable car will ever service this elevation. Even something as basic as enjoying a warm meal becomes an event at such heights, where oxygen scarcity makes everything feel slightly dreamlike. Wears an outer copper shell that functions as a Faraday cage, allowing lightning to dissipate along the exterior rather than penetrating the structure. Scientists and medical researchers work here, studying how human bodies respond to extreme altitude conditions and the physiological adaptations that make survival possible at such elevations. The ultimate cliffside experience. Cliffside Capsule, established in 2013, pioneered a concept that sounds more fictional than real. Sleeping suspended on a vertical rock face thousands of feet above the ground. Guests don't exactly walk to their sleeping pod. Instead, they navigate via ferrata system, steel rungs and cables bolted directly into the cliff. The climb stretches 90 minutes to 2 hours with absolutely no emergency exits in between. The descent presents its own brand of adrenaline. Guests don't hike down, they slide down 6 separate zipline routes, experiencing controlled freefall across the canyon as their primary method of departure. Inside the glass capsule, everything sits exposed, including the toilet, which offers an unobstructed view straight down hundreds of feet into the abyss. Here, extreme adventure tourism and luxury accommodations don't just coexist, they're fundamentally inseparable, forcing every resident to negotiate between survival instinct and comfort simultaneously. The temple that shouldn't be standing, Taiyuan Mountain Towers Temple, located in the Chinchu region, claims the title of the supreme immortal mountain in that geography. At the summit, called Golden Peak, the main hall weighs several tons, but distributes its entire weight across just 65 square feet of contact area. Three sides open directly into bottomless chasms. Ming Dynasty builders faced an interesting constraint. They had no cement, no binding agents, nothing modern to work with. Instead, they carved deep into quartz rock and stacked stone slabs, using mortise and groove techniques essentially, careful geometric cuts that allow stones to lock together through precision alone. This design flexibility permitted the structure to flex and shift slightly with earthquakes and powerful winds, rather than resisting and shattering. The hall functions as the region's highest point, making it essentially a lightning rod for the entire area. Countless direct strikes have hit over the centuries, yet the structure remains standing, defying conventional risk analysis. When clouds roll in and blanket the surrounding slopes, Golden Peak transforms into an island floating in a sea of white mist, a visual effect that's equally spiritual and scientifically mesmerizing. The observatory between peaks. Sphinx Observatory Jungfrau occupies a location so extreme it required an entirely unconventional access route. Positioned at 11,811 feet along a razor-thin ridge between two snow-covered peaks in Switzerland, the building exists because scientists needed it there. Rather than constructing a mountain road, engineers built a railway that literally passes through the mountain's interior. Visitors take a train through solid rock, then board a 354-foot elevator that carries them to the observatory in about 25 seconds. The journey itself, ascending 25 seconds after riding through a mountain, defines the surreal nature of this research facility. Construction commenced in 1937, working among constant snow, avalanches, and terrain so difficult that each day presented new dangers. Today, the observatory sits atop some of Europe's most significant research operations, a permanently staffed facility where science happens at elevations most aircraft don't comfortably reach. The mountain's frozen archive. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault represents humanity's most serious attempt at creating an insurance policy against agricultural catastrophe. Situated 120 meters deep inside a rocky mountain, positioned above 130 meters of sea level elevation, this facility ensures protection against any conceivable sea level rise scenario. The surrounding permafrost maintains interior temperatures at approximately 26 to 27 degrees Fahrenheit naturally, without requiring artificial cooling systems. The vault's capacity reaches 4.5 million different crop varieties, containing roughly 2.5 billion individual seeds. The engineering withstands major disasters, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, nuclear radiation, and even meteor impacts. In 2015, seeds were withdrawn for the first and only time in the facility's operational history, restoring a collection damaged by conflict elsewhere. The deposited seeds remain the property of their original contributors. The vault itself functions purely as secure storage, a genetic time capsule protecting the world's agricultural future. The houses that rise 164 feet above ground. In the forests of Papua, the Koraway people constructed a solution to multiple environmental threats simultaneously: flooding, predatory animals, malaria, carrying insects, and hostile human groups. Their answer: build everything above ground at extraordinary heights, sometimes reaching 164 feet. These aren't small tree houses built for children. We're discussing multi-ton residential structures assembled using vines, forest rattan, and crushed bark. No nails, no screws, no modern steel cables. The engineering works entirely through tension and interlocking, yet these houses survive for generations. The construction method seems almost reckless. The wooden frames and walls consist of highly flammable materials, dried palm leaves, and timber. Yet residents still maintain clay stoves built directly into the floor for cooking and warmth. Access requires climbing a single tree trunk with footholds barely wide enough for half a foot, no railings, and surfaces that remain perpetually slick from rainforest moisture. Getting there demands serious commitment. Outsiders must travel by riverboat, then walk for days through humid forest, thick with dangerous insects, unpredictable weather, and terrain so isolated that few outsiders ever attempt the journey. The highest monastery in the world's roof, Pero Taktang, situated at 10,240 feet in Bhutan's mountain regions, has almost given up entirely on the concept of flat ground. The monastery clings to vertical rock as something spray-painted onto a cliff face, existing beyond the reach of any motorized vehicle. Reaching the complex requires pilgrims to navigate dense pine forest, negotiate steep stone steps, and traverse cliffside sections where traditional vehicles would simply become useless. entire compound consists of 4 main temples, arranged on terrain so extreme that finding even a small open courtyard becomes an achievement. Winter transforms the location into something almost supernatural: high mountain fog and thin snow blanket the temple roofs, rock faces, and prayer flags shredded by constant wind. In 1998, a major fire destroyed much of the main structure, killed 1 monk, and caused numerous ancient religious artifacts to vanish forever, reminding everyone that these extreme locations offer no protection from disaster. The smallest island with a human structure, Bishop Rock in the Atlantic Ocean, earned a Guinness designation as the world's smallest island to support a man-made structure. We're discussing a rock with barely enough space to stand upright, yet humans built an entire lighthouse tower reaching 161 feet skyward. The construction process required 7 full years of workers clinging to this location while violent ocean waves crashed against the rock. The tower was built from enormous granite blocks and reinforced repeatedly over the years, yet it has never known anything resembling peaceful conditions. Lighthouse keepers consistently reported feeling the entire tower shake after major waves struck, not cracking, just flexing under the impact. The Fortress of the Atlantic. Mont Saint-Michel, located off Normandy's coast in France, began its existence in the 8th century when humans transformed a small granite island into an enormous monastic and fortified complex. The genuinely remarkable feature: tidal changes can turn this entire structure into a completely isolated island within just a few hours. Over the centuries, Benedictine monks and builders expanded the complex, dramatically adding churches, monasteries, Gothic halls, and reinforced defensive architecture. Surrounding walls, watchtowers, and drawbridges created a fortress so formidable that it never fell, even during the 100 Years' War. Today, despite attracting millions of visitors annually, only 30 to 40 permanent residents remain, including monks and a small civilian population. The river's solitary resident, the Drina River House occupies a peculiar niche in the loneliest structure category. Standing on the top of a narrow rock jutting into the middle of a violent river, this small wooden structure has endured for decades against powerful currents and regular flooding. Rather than representing professional engineering or architectural expertise, the house originated in 1968 when local youth wanted a place to rest while swimming. The builders adapted to the powerful river flow through an innovative design. Gaps beneath the floor allow floodwater to pass through instead of accumulating pressure. This simple solution proved remarkably effective, and the structure transformed into a modern cultural symbol, attracting thousands of visitors annually. The temple suspended among clouds. Mount Fanjing's Golden Temple qualifies as the most dangerous and visually spectacular cloud temple anywhere on Earth. The temple sanctuary sits atop Red Cloud's golden summit, a natural stone spire projecting straight skyward to 7,664 feet, equivalent to a 770-story building. Two separate temples are connected by a tiny stone bridge stretched across a narrow fissure at a truly dizzying height, appearing to float among clouds. Reaching the Golden Temple requires hiking approximately 8,000 steep stone steps. At the most dangerous sections, climbers must grip iron chains anchored directly into vertical rock faces. This mountain spends over 200 days annually shrouded in thick fog and clouds. Consequently, the stone steps become slippery, and the slightest error becomes genuinely dangerous. Visitors regularly report that the climbing experience reaches beyond physical challenge into something more psychological, an extended meditation on risk and persistence. The cliff-anchored monastery, Panagia Hosvotesa, the second oldest monastery in Greece, defies basic architectural logic. Located on Amoros Island at 984 feet elevation above the Aegean Sea, the 8-story structure stretches roughly 131 feet in length, while some sections compress to only 16 feet in width, blending almost seamlessly with vertical rock. The monastery has remained continuously active for nearly 1,000 years, currently maintained by just 3 monks living in profound isolation amid ocean winds and extreme terrain. According to tradition, the entire structure was built to protect a sacred icon believed to have drifted from Palestine aboard an unmanned vessel. Reaching the monastery requires climbing over 300 steep stone steps to a low doorway that forces everyone to bow upon entry, a physical reminder of submission. An iron chisel embedded in the cliff by an 11th century builder remains suspended at this height for over 900 years before finally falling in 1956. The cave monastery of Montenegro. Ostrog Monastery clings to a sheer cliff at 900 meters, appearing more like an impossible illusion suspended in air than an actual human-built structure. Remarkably, a grapevine has thrived and produced fruit for centuries, despite having essentially no soil, a phenomenon locals regard as miraculous, while visitors struggle to explain it scientifically. The monks here worked with the natural cave formations rather than constructing separate walls. They painted directly onto stone and carved narrow, deep spaces that feel like entering the mountain's interior. The path ascending to the monastery features steep sections with deep cliffs on both sides, yet barefoot pilgrims still make the journey annually, creating scenes that modern observers find almost impossible to believe still occur in the 21st century. During World War II, a Nazi bomb struck the monastery. Strangely, it failed to detonate, instead breaking in half. This malfunction preserved the structure intact, and this historical incident has become woven into the site's spiritual narrative. Meteora's floating temples. Meteora represents a monastery complex holding records for dramatic architectural ambition on steep rock cliffs. Viewed from the valley below, the monasteries appear like castles suspended among clouds, positioned on sandstone pillars so high that medieval raiders found them essentially unreachable. This complex emerged in the 14th century when monks required refuge from violence and danger below. For centuries, Meteora had no conventional pathways upward. Instead, people climbed by rope ladders, pulleys, and hanging baskets along vertical rock. A single broken rope meant death, yet construction continued regardless. The last monk ascended by basket in 1950. Today, though stairs exist, Meteora's original sense of profound isolation remains strikingly visible, reminding visitors why monks originally selected such punishing locations for spiritual pursuit. The golden architecture among clouds. Liujian Mountain, positioned at 7,218 feet, holds the record for China's highest gold-plated architectural complex. Gilded bronze pavilions rise from jagged stone peaks, appearing to float among white clouds. Accessing this spiritual space requires pushing physical limits across precarious cliffs and thousands of steep stairs. The sensation of looking down into the deep abyss beneath your feet creates a terrifying experience for anyone uncomfortable with heights. Weather changes extremely rapidly at this altitude. Winter temperatures can plummet to 14 degrees Fahrenheit, making frozen pathways incredibly dangerous. The contrast between pristine white snow and the regal golden architecture creates a surreal visual experience that photographs struggle to capture adequately. The remote fortress in the desert. Masada Fortress rises approximately 1,480 feet above the Dead Sea, encircled by sheer cliffs, forming a nearly impenetrable stronghold. A system of 12 massive cisterns carved deep into the rock could store millions of gallons of rainwater from flash floods, highly effective in an arid desert environment. The Roman army constructed a colossal ramp of earth and stone to access Masada's summit, a military engineering achievement allowing siege equipment and soldiers to reach the top. During the siege of 72 to 73 CE, nearly 960 Jewish inhabitants reportedly chose mass suicide to avoid capture by Roman forces, with only 2 women and 5 children surviving. archaeologists discovered 11 inscribed pottery shards, one bearing the name Benner, potentially connected to the ritual of drawing lots to select those who would carry out the killings as described historically. Yet archaeology has found relatively few human remains at Masada and no communal burial pits, raising questions about the precise historical accuracy of these accounts. The fortress within, Preljina Castle in Slovenia, holds the distinction of being the world's largest cave castle, constructed directly into a limestone cave mouth on a vertical cliff rising 403 feet. The entire rear structure relies on a single limestone rock mass, with natural stalactite formations creating ceilings and pillars. The cave system behind Preljina Castle extends for several miles, establishing an underground tunnel network connected to the cliff's exterior. During periods of siege, this underground network allowed defenders to transport food and supplies. Modern access uses a drawbridge, while original entrances positioned higher on the cliff restricted direct access. Large bat colonies inhabit the unrestored cave sections as stable long-term habitat, adding biological complexity to this architectural marvel. The mud fortress of the desert, Al Jazul, known as the most isolated mud fortress on the planet, sits atop a monolithic rock rising approximately 492 feet with nearly vertical sides comparable to locating a residential area at a 50-story building's height in a desert. Structures here consist of mud, bricks, and straw, maintaining stability for centuries without modern materials like steel or cement. The fundamental problem: no water source exists on the summit. Residents must descend to the valley to collect water and carry it back up under outdoor temperatures reaching 122 degrees Fahrenheit. No vehicle roads exist here. Access depends entirely on narrow stone steps carved into the mountain slope. Houses built entirely of stone feature bedroom windows looking straight into open space, transforming every daily activity into an extreme performance. The volcanic island fortress, Oashima, functions as a refuge placed directly inside an active geological system that has never truly gone dormant in the Pacific Ocean. The community doesn't just exist remotely from the mainland, the entire settlement exists within a volcanic crater, further enclosed by steep walls rising 650 to 300 feet as part of a much larger outer caldera. In 1785, when the Tenmi volcano erupted, approximately 327 residents found themselves trapped between ash and lava. transforming the island into a sealed environment with no escape. That sense of isolation hasn't disappeared even today. Helicopters remain the only reliable access, operating just one flight daily with 9 available seats, and frequently canceled due to fog or strong winds. For residents waiting for flights, when a family member on the mainland faces critical illness, the delay transcends mere inconvenience. It becomes psychological strain. Newly assigned workers quickly discover that the confined space and closed ring of oceans can rapidly transform quietness into confinement. The isolated island Christian community. Skellig Michael takes its name from Gaelic words meaning Michael's Rock, identifying it as a remote island off the Irish coast. This isolated location served as a Christian monastic retreat for centuries, beginning in the 6th century and establishing one of Europe's oldest surviving communities. Monks painstakingly carved approximately 600 stone steps into the cliff face, leading to the ancient monastery constructed using remarkable dry stone techniques. This method involved precisely stacking stones by hand without mortar, allowing the structures to endure over 1,400 years. Refuge at the summit of Alpine science. Refuge des Cosmic Hut was built in the 1930s not as climber accommodation, but as a high-altitude physics laboratory dedicated to cosmic ray research. Today, reaching the hut from the Aguilla du Midi cable car requires crossing a razor-thin snowy ridge where a single misstep means falling several thousand feet into glacier abyss. The rapid ascent from approximately 3,300 feet to nearly 12,500 feet in only 20 minutes creates serious altitude sickness risks, with cases of cerebral or pulmonary edema occurring directly at the location. The structure stands on solid rock while surrounded by permanent snowfields and slowly flowing glaciers constantly reshaping the landscape. Despite the lethal environment, the refuge functions like an improbable high-altitude hotel, serving hot European meals, draft beer, and offering double bedrooms. Beneath the modern building, remnants of the original laboratory remain, and the French National Center for Scientific Research still operates atmospheric monitoring instruments. The loneliest lighthouse. Threngaviti qualifies as the world's most isolated lighthouse, standing atop a basalt pillar rising about 118 feet above the stormy Atlantic Ocean. Built in 1939, it was once accessible only by climbing the vertical rock face using your hands, while winds and waves battered the base. The site simultaneously functions as a refuge for puffins and other seabirds nesting in narrow rock crevices where wind speeds exceed 125 miles per hour. The lighthouse itself, a reinforced concrete cube measuring about 13 feet on each side, was specifically engineered to withstand extreme weather conditions. Living in space. The International Space Station represents one of humanity's most extreme survival environments. The psychological challenge is profound. Systems recycle 93% of liquids from sweat, breath, and wastewater. Yes, astronauts essentially drink coffee that was once their own urine. The processed water is technically cleaner than tap water, yet the psychological hurdle remains substantial. Using the toilet requires strapping yourself in place and relying on vacuum suction to prevent waste from floating in microgravity. The human body faces the most critical challenge. Without approximately 2 hours of daily exercise, bones lose density through calcium loss via urine. The heart can actually shrink because it works less in microgravity. Every sip of water and every movement demands constant effort to adapt to conditions beyond Earth. The ISS represents a technological achievement that simultaneously defines an extreme biological environment. The convenience store at the edge of existence. Perhaps no location better embodies human determination to commerce in impossible places. A tiny shop covering only about 22 square feet, clinging to an almost vertical rock face like a supply point suspended in midair. This shop dangles above a sheer abyss, and to reach it, visitors must cross a cable-assisted climbing route stretching for hundreds of yards. Many people require nearly 90 minutes to reach the top. Every morning, staff members carry water and drinks up on their backs. No elevator, no transport route, just human effort pressed against the cliff face. Since 2018, this location has attracted millions of social media views and has become a symbol of human determination to establish commerce anywhere, regardless of physical logic. Standing across from these locations, we're confronted with a question that shapes human civilization itself. What makes us push against the boundaries of what's possible? These dwellings and structures aren't accidents. They represent deliberate choices made by humans who looked at vertical cliffs, stormy seas, and thin mountain air and decided, I'm going to make this home. Sometimes the answer is spiritual monks seeking isolation for contemplation. Sometimes it's practical hunters needing shelter, researchers requiring specific locations. Sometimes it's purely ambitious, a desire to prove that human ingenuity can overcome any geographical limitation. What emerges across all these stories is a profound truth about humanity. We're not content with merely surviving. We engineer, we build, we persist, and we occasionally lose our minds in the process. These extreme dwellings remind us that the margin between human ambition and human stubbornness is incredibly thin. And perhaps that's exactly why we keep returning to these impossible places, because they show us who we really are when we stop accepting that anything is beyond our reach. Refuge at the summit of Alpine science. Refuge des Cosmic Hut was built in the 1930s, not as climber accommodation, but as a high-altitude physics laboratory dedicated to cosmic ray research. Today, reaching the hut from the Aguilla du Midi cable car requires crossing a razor-thin snowy ridge where a single misstep means falling several thousand feet into glacier abyss. The rapid ascent from approximately 3,300 feet to nearly 12,500 feet in only 20 minutes creates serious altitude sickness risks, with cases of cerebral or pulmonary edema occurring directly at the location. The structure stands on solid rock while surrounded by permanent snowfields and slowly flowing glaciers constantly reshaping the landscape. Despite the lethal environment, the refuge functions like an improbable high-altitude hotel, serving hot European meals, draft beer, and offering double bedrooms. Beneath the modern building, remnants of the original laboratory remain, and the French National Center for Scientific Research still operates atmospheric monitoring instruments. The loneliest lighthouse. Threngaviti qualifies as the world's most isolated lighthouse, standing atop a basalt pillar rising about 118 feet above the stormy Atlantic Ocean. Built in 1939, it was once accessible only by climbing the vertical rock face using your hands, while winds and waves battered the base. The site simultaneously functions as a refuge for puffins and other seabirds, nesting in narrow rock crevices where wind speeds exceed 125 miles per hour. The lighthouse itself, a reinforced concrete cube measuring about 13 feet on each side, was specifically engineered to withstand extreme weather conditions. Living in space. The International Space Station represents one of humanity's most extreme survival environments. The psychological challenge is profound. Systems recycle 93% of liquids from sweat, breath, and wastewater. Yes, astronauts essentially drink coffee that was once their own urine. The processed water is technically cleaner than tap water, yet the psychological hurdle remains substantial. Using the toilet requires strapping yourself in place and relying on vacuum suction to prevent waste from floating in microgravity. The human body faces the most critical challenge. Without approximately 2 hours of daily exercise, bones lose density through calcium loss via urine. The heart can actually shrink because it works less in microgravity. Every sip of water and every movement demands constant effort to adapt to conditions beyond Earth. The ISS represents a technological achievement that simultaneously defines an extreme biological environment. The convenience store at the edge of existence. Perhaps no location better embodies human determination to commerce in impossible places. A tiny shop covering only about 22 square feet, clinging to an almost vertical rock face like a supply point suspended in midair. This shop dangles above a sheer abyss, and to reach it, visitors must cross a cable-assisted climbing route stretching for hundreds of yards. Many people require nearly 90 minutes to reach the top. Every morning, staff members carry water and drinks up on their backs. No elevator, no transport route, just human effort pressed against the cliff face. Since 2018, this location has attracted millions of social media views and has become a symbol of human determination to establish commerce anywhere, regardless of physical logic.